Hey everybody, welcome to making your app not look like shit. So, yeah. We'll call this Design in CSS 101. I'm going to do this a little bit differently than I think I've done it in the past. And I would say my criteria for success on this is if you can recall at least 3 ways to keep your app from looking like garbage. I'm going to call this a good use of our hour. So, rather than like talk about design principles or CSS structure or something, we're going to talk like very practical things that I have seen in student project after student project after student project, and it's what's making your app look like it was like made by a 13-year-old using GeoCities in 1998. So, number one thing, actually, I want you to see this one for yourself. So, I want you to go to a site that you use regularly, that you think is well designed. You go, man, if only I could make things that look like this. This is great. Could be, I don't know, Fitbit, Gmail, whatever. I don't care what. I want you to go to it, and I want you to figure out what things are aligned which ways. So keep track of how many things are left aligned, how many things are centered, and how many things are right aligned. You just keep a little tally. Take a couple minutes. Go. Find a site. How many left aligned things do they have? How many centered? How many right?
What would possess somebody in a class here with something really crazy, like an import
auto-generated. All right, anything stand out to you from that? Todd?
So you said I don't think anything has left behind.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me what it is.
It's called Redbubble.
Redbubble. The sticker site?
Yeah.
Ooh, you sure? So we have some centered call to actions here. These are right aligned though. Those are right aligned. That's left aligned.
I guess I just
Left aligned, left aligned. Left aligned, left aligned, left aligned. More left aligned. Some centering here. All left aligned, right aligned. Cool. Other observations from other sites. From other sites. Yeah. Okay. What is it? Hey. So this one's kind of interesting because this is on a grid.
Yeah, I noticed that too when you opened it up.
I know. We can even like see into the matrix on this. Check this shit out. I'm actually pretty happy with the grid on this. If I go over here, where's your grid, baby? Oh, just there. That's all. But within this grid, left align, left align, left align, sideways aligned. Left, left. This is centered within the button. Left, left, left. What else? Other sites? Did you notice? Okay. Oh, great. Okay, so we've got centering here. Oh yeah, this is tons of centering. And then down here, all left, 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 left. Okay. What else?
I don't actually like the layout, but I like content. Twitch.tv.
Sure. Okay. Left, 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 centered, left, 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 left. Left, 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 left. Okay. Yeah.
Actually, never mind.
Yeah, George.
So why are majority of the sites left related?
Oh yeah. Why? Anybody know? Yeah.
Do you read left or right in English?
Yeah, indeed. How many novels you read where they centered the text? Woof. That'd be pretty rough, right? I'm looking at the ones that I found. You look at YouTube. Left, 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 left.
What about the boxes?
Which boxes?
Like it has like the picture of it, and then everything's left aligned in it, and it looks like one box. Like the pictures, and then the title, and then like the description about it.
Like this
Yeah.
right here?
Yeah.
Yeah. What about it?
Is that like? Is that? Or did you just have it like?
We'd say this like kind of almost like tabular,
Okay.
almost. You can say it's justified. I really like Reverb's site. left, 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 centered, 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 left, centered, left. Weird. If I look at Denver Egotist, left, 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 centered, right, yeah, centered-ish.
So do you agree that it seems like there's a lot of information that needs to be left justified, and then it's like simplified, do this now?
Yeah, it's like the centered stuff calls our attention, but if everything's calling our attention, nothing's calling our attention. So one of the most like amateur hour things I see on student projects is centering the fuck out of absolutely everything. It's not no centering, it's about being judicious about when you do that. So like the reverb one's a great example where what's centered on this page? Add to cart, make an offer, watch. These are like actions that they want me to take. Anything they want me to read, left align. There's a saying in the design community that centering is for wedding invitations. By and large, way easier to read. And anybody know why? Like that's not just like someone's opinion. There's like a mechanical reason why that's the case. Exactly. Your eye knows exactly, it gets to the end of the line and knows precisely how far back it has to go to get to the next line. Yeah, Jared.
I looked up a Japanese website and they have like all their sidebars on the right.
There you go. And so yeah, reading left to right like informs some of that. But still, what you're looking for is a straight edge and a ragged edge. This is a straight edge, this is a ragged edge. That's maximum readability. You might think you can have two straight edges on it. What's that called? Justified text. Massive problem with justified text is, and it's almost unavoidable, you get these things called rivers. And they look like this. There's big spaces in the text. Happens every time you justify something. Yeah. No. Oh, sorry. Right justify? No, you totally can. But understand that when you're doing that, you're defying an expectation. That's okay because it calls a lot of attention. Maybe that's exactly what you want to do. But that's still easier to read than super centering something. Cool. So one of the easiest ways to make your app not look terrible, stick with left alignment. Unless you specifically want to call attention to something. Then maybe consider centering it. Cool. Next thing. Of all these sites we looked at, did you see any one of them that used the browser default typeface? Craigslist. I'm so glad you brought that up. I don't think Craigslist actually does either. There's always like a contest every year to make a better Craigslist, and nobody is ever able to do it. They make ones that look better, but they're not quite as usable. Yeah. Let's see. So the Craigslist aesthetic has been much talked about in the design world. Times New Roman. And I think what is the browser default? Firefox browser default typeface. It is Times New Roman? Okay, so it is a browser default. So one of the reasons that Craigslist does things like that is it's supposed to look like a garage sale. It's supposed to feel like, oh no, we're not a company, man. We're just sort of slapped together. It's just something I made real quick, so like all of us cool cats could, just like trade our stuff with each other. Craig is a super hippie, and like that's been reflected in the aesthetic of the thing since day one. Making it look like a Silicon Valley startup doesn't feel like Craigslist anymore. It feels like somebody's fucking marketplace. Not supposed to feel like a marketplace. So, yeah, browser default, appropriate. Everything else, you can do better. So, by the way, I keep saying typeface and not font. Anybody know the difference? Nope. Good guess.
You can have different fonts for one purpose.
Yes, we can have more than one font for a typeface. Any other guesses like what a font is? Arial is a typeface. Arial bold at 16 pixels is a font. So once upon a time, in the early days of type, you would buy a font. You have a type foundry that would go, cool, we make Helvetica. Would you like to buy one of our fonts? And the fonts were these little blocks, and they had the shape of characters in that typeface, and you'd arrange them on blocks, and then you'd put ink on them and stamp them on things. And then if you wanted something that was bold, if you wanted something that was bigger, they came in like boxes. So you got a different one. So you say I have all these fonts, but they're all the same typeface. And okay, so typefaces. Okay, so I remember this wasn't even that long ago. This is maybe 5 years ago. Remember that Helvetica documentary that was on Netflix? A lot of people. It was very popular. Remember my wife watching the Helvetica documentary. I went, "You watched a documentary on a font?" But one of the things about typography is like it is truly an Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole, man. As soon as you start finding, like, the question that got me really going is like, how come I recognize that as an A, something that has meaning, and you can even do that so many different ways. You're doing that with pixels. Like, you can usually still recognize it. Really, these are just scribbles, and the scribbles mean things to us. Holy shit, that's kind of wild. And like our ability to differentiate so much between very minute differences in little scribbles. It's like, okay, interesting. Because the typefaces are like innately a part of that. Like, you can't have a character that's not in a typeface. And when you think about how something like that, how that has a feeling to it. It's old-timey, it's regal, it's like overly formal. I mean, the subtext on this is helping Denver to suck less daily. So like, this is even a joke. Just the way that they presented the characters. What? Why can that be? Why do different typefaces make us feel different ways? We say some things are serious and some things are silly or playful or ironic or whatever. Why can that be? And when you keep scratching at that, the answer is that typography is a culture sponge. It is the reason you feel that way about them is they were used in a particular way in a particular context, and now they're innately associated with that. Comic Sans is not a bad typeface. It's actually a pretty fucking well-designed one. The problem is it was one of 7 fonts that were available on like Windows 95, and everybody made their shitty church newsletters with it. And They're like, please stop stealing my popcorn signs for the break room. And so now you go like, oh, it's a fucking joke of a typeface. Only because that's how it was used. So if we circle this all back around to why when you use a default typeface on your web app, they go, so you're lazy. Because that's why you would do that, right? So every time you see that, you go, oof, this person didn't even try. All you had to do was like one level of effort to change that, and now you have something that looks better.
It creates a paradox of interest, right?
Yes.
Same fonts, like, people are using Myriad or whatever.
Yeah.
And then now it's not cool anymore.
Oh yeah, and here's the thing. You don't need to become a typographer or anything. If we look up Google Fonts, here's your hack. Here's how, like, without being a typographer, you look like you know what you're talking about. Go over to Font Properties, click Number of Styles, and move this up in like this kind of range. Good typefaces have a lot of different fonts with them. Somebody's like school project or one-offy kind of thing usually has like one. So if we move this up here, all right, Montserrat is a classic fucking typeface. Railway, crazy popular. All these are like really popular typefaces. And if we further narrow that down, Serif Fonts, good for long form text, a little bit better for print, honestly. But they feel a little bit more formal, a little bit more important. Serifs with little feet on the bottom of the characters, and they serve a function. Like, if we narrow this down to serif typefaces, these little feet on the bottom help your eye move along the baseline for the thing. So it's the same reason that like having something left justified helps your eye jump back. Serifs help your eye follow along. They tend to work a lot better in print than they do digitally. Because even on this screen, you can see that the serifs are the worst looking parts of the character because they're supposed to be curves, but we have to represent them with pixels. But they feel a lot classier. And like, it's pretty rare you see a book or something that's, or any like super long form text that's written without it. But if we want to look something like hip and modern, we probably go with sans serif. These don't have the feet. They look a lot crisper, a lot cleaner, a lot more computery. And you can see they have different kinds of personalities to them. But if you've got a lot of styles, it's kind of hard to go wrong with most of these. And then if we do display fonts, yeah, there's not a display font with 14 styles. So these are like special use things. And this is like, overusing display fonts is one of the ways that you make your app look like a church newsletter. People get way too crazy with this shit. Something like this is good for like maybe a three-word company, a three-letter company name. Use it for the logo or something like that. Same with that. Nobody wants to read more than a couple words in like most of these typefaces. But they've got a personality to them. And so if it's like an advertisement, logo for the company, something like that, like totally appropriate. But also in none of those apps that we looked at, did you see a whole lot of type that looked like that. There's a good reason for that. These are also more fun to build for typographers though, so there tends to be an awful lot of display fonts. Cool, so here's how easy it is for your app to not look like shit. You go sans serif with lots of styles. Roboto, good typeface. Montserrat, good typeface. Source Sans Pro, killer. You click the plus sign, and then you copy and paste that into your style sheet, and then you copy and paste that into your style sheet, and you're done. Correct. Watch. It's actually this easy. So, nothing up this sleeve, nothing up this sleeve. Please don't use default type. I'm gonna time it. All right, off to the races. Touch index.html, touch app.css, vim, index.html. All right, I'm even gonna like do it to spec. So I'll have doc type, HTML, HTML. End of the week for everyone. Body, there, come on. And then I'll give it a title. And then I'll give it a meta char set. I'll give it a link, rel, style sheet, href, app.css, h1, how does this look? Cool, then we go over to app.css. I copy in this import. I copy in the CSS thing. I apply it to the whole body. And when I serve it up, hey, 1 minute and 40 seconds from scratch. Yeah, I sort of ran out of time for the style, and I didn't really have like it was really focused on the looks so much. It's easy. Easy.
And so if you hadn't used the Google Font Graph,
Mhm.
you wouldn't have to do the import. Is that correct? That was like a system default.
Yeah, totally. So if I do something like get rid of that and make this Verdana, which is built in. I don't have to import anything. But even like Verdana is probably the best system font, and it's a little played out too.
Is the importing font ever not work for some reason?
Oh yeah, it goes over the network. The like network goes down,
Oh.
and that's exactly why you have to specify a fallback. So you go, all right, well, if that one wasn't available, then use this one instead. You always want to have some system font as a fallback.
Sans serif is a system default?
Sans serif is whatever the font's default sans serif typeface is, which is probably Arial. Yeah.
So as far as CSS, this is for me, I'm only speaking for myself here, but it's not necessarily like design principles, which I also suck at, and I should
Right.
also do better at that.
Correct.
It's just the display of how everything looks. Like that's the most difficult part of CSS that I have no clue how to do. Is there like ways to get better than that other than just suffering immensely for the next 12 weeks?
So it's usually something like, I mean, it's an hour, so we're not going to get all the way through this. I do have some good videos on layout in particular, and we'll do a little bit of layout. But you'd be surprised how easy it is to implement in CSS a design that doesn't suck. Difficult designs are counterintuitively much more difficult to do. But if you want to try it, try making something look like this. It's hard, but it's not like, oh man, you got to be one of the best CSS developers in America to do something like this. So it's not honestly that bad. Yeah. Yeah. Not that book in particular. If you're looking for a design book to start with, 2 recommendations. One is Design for Hackers. that's a really good design principles like basics book. So if things like hierarchy and unity and rhythm, like if you've never heard any of those things in like reference to visual language, Design for Hackers is a great place to start. If you want like the kinds of things that we're talking about right now, where it's like stop centering shit so much, do more padding, that kind of, which is the next one. Then you want Refactoring Ui, which is this site. Killer book. It's my favorite book on design I think I've ever read. And it's all from the dev's point of view, and it has CSS examples for everything. Because like that's kind of the problem with a lot of like these kinds of things is it's like, you know, for the web or books or posters or whatever. And it's true that all these principles are like universal. They apply to everything. But like it's very nice to have something that's written in our medium. Yeah.
How much do people with these new, with the front end stuff, how much do they rely on CSS? Like how much would somebody actually be doing CSS who uses React?
Sure. It changes a lot company to company. So you'll get places where it's like, oh, I don't do any of that, the designers do. Now, if you're on a designer Slack, they'll go, why the fuck do they expect me to code? Like, because CSS to them is programming. So it's considered like a bizarre expectation for a designer to be able to implement a design on the web. They're like, that's what programmers are for, right? Meanwhile, programmers go, I don't do looks. I make sure that it works with the component. You are supposed to be the one who. And so what you should take away from that, and there's also places where like you're not allowed to touch the designs. Our design team does that. And there's also places like, no, we farm out the designs to a contractor. They send us PDFs, and you make things look like the PDF. So there's that full range in there. But all this like, I don't know how to do the means that there's a lot of employability in like figuring that out. Anything that people do that with is like, oh wow, that's hard, or that's boring, or that sucks. That means there's a lot of money. Cool. So yeah. Oh, I saw you reaching for it. All right. So next thing that you can do to not make your site look like shit is padding. Best principle for pad. Okay, so here's what people usually do. Since we have this up, I have, we'll call this the Flatiron Times. And we'll use a good semantic tag. And got something like that. And address, believe it or not, is the semantic tag for a byline. And then I have a section. All right, so I have this article here, and if I serve it up, okay, seen a lot of projects that look like this. A couple really easy things we can do to make this look better. The first is fixing that padding. So just for purposes of illustration, I'm going to put a border around this. All right, so that's the article. First thing we can do to make this look good is put padding in it. So the best advice I've gotten on this is I was always doing stuff like this. We go like, all right, that looks all right. Or like, yeah, there we go. When you go from not enough padding to the right amount of padding, you tend to stop when it stops actively looking bad, not when it looks good. So instead, start with too much padding, like way too much, and then start taking some size off of that. So we go, all right, what's 8 look like? Okay, now it's 6. And you end up with something a lot more reasonable. Next thing we can do to make this not look like shit, constrain the length of your type. This is way too many words. So what we do instead is we say all of our paragraphs should have a max width of, and what you're looking for on the web is about 8 words. 8 to 10 words, somewhere in there. That's about the right number. So what if I make that 15 rounds? Okay, not enough. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, about that. That's pretty normal. And then you go, all right, well, that's hard to read. Let me make the font bigger. But now the calculation changes. But about 8, 10 words, kind of in that neighborhood, that's maximum readability on the web.
You can explain what limbs are?
Oh, sure. I feel like it. I feel like it. So in M, typography again, this will do the same thing in this case. In any type, the widest character is a capital letter M. It takes up all the possible space for it. So that ends up being a really useful measurement. It's called an M. Because like how much padding you have, how far apart things are, these aren't just guesses, and it's not something that someone with a beret goes, more. These things are like largely mathematically derived, and you want the stuff on the page to have some kind of defined relationship with each other. And if you start with, all right, this is type that's mostly going to be read about this far away, and so for maximum readability, the type needs to be this big at that far away, and I've got this many characters on a line, and so my M width is this. If I base my margin, my paddings, and these distances roughly around that, it sort of looks like everything was designed together because you see these little relationships pop up over and over again. And a rem is, so by default, an M is relative to the typeface that you are, or the font size that you're currently using. Rem is referenced to the entire document. So it ends up being a more consistent unit of measurement. There's like a time and a place for both of them, honestly.
Wait, okay. Wait, I understand the M. That's where I guess like in dashes or in dashes.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So then how is the M derived? I don't get that. I'm so confused. The whole document.
So the M is derived off of the size of a capital M in Verdana at 16 pixels or whatever this is right now. So 20 rems is 20 times 16 pixels.
Oh.
Or something like that. That would be the case if it was square.
Oh, yeah, what is it?
Okay, so in this case, they're the same.
Right. Okay, when would they not be the same?
They would not be the same if I said that the font size for the article was 8 pixels and it gets really tiny. The max width stays the same if I do rems, because it's still basing it off of the 16 pixels at the top level, not the 8 that I just said there. But if I change that to M's, that should get smaller, yeah.
Okay. And with that 16 top level pixel, is that just a browser default?
Correct.
Okay.
So your browser applies a style sheet to every single web page. I actually find it super annoying. And so I'll use what's called a reset that undoes browser defaults. And so if you, yeah. So if you apply a reset like that, and then put all of your stuff after that, then like your H1s aren't automatically bigger. Things don't automatically have margin and padding and that kind of thing.
So,
Mm-hmm.
if you're developing, say, an outdoor
Mhm.
would you replace pixel with points, or is there like an automated service that does that at the end?
Nope. You should basically never use points on the web. Points and
I mean, for like an app, like a pro app on your phone.
oh yeah, especially like any digital screen should not use points or picas. Those are like very specifically print measurements because your newspaper can't zoom in. Like it's an actual fixed value. And like they have a definition.
And then how do you get the scope for different size screens?
So you do media queries, variable font size is like kind of a hot topic in web design right now, where like you can have it scale fluidly. There's actually like some problems with that. What I usually recommend is very specifically choose different pixel values for different different viewport sizes. Because even if you do something where like, you can use percents, for example. Like if I do font size is 100%, like that, like it'll get bigger and stuff when you zoom in. Like that works. The problem is that it, big stuff should get bigger as something scales up slower than small things should. And so those don't actually have all that much of a linear relationship, so it's usually better to do it by hand. And also, like, there's not an infinite number of like pixel densities on things. Even something like this isn't all that different than your computer. The pixels are just enormous instead of tiny. So you don't end up with like an infinite number of pixel densities to design for. Yeah.
Is there like a, I guess, default CSS thing that goes on where it's like what you're basing your sizes to be off of? Like sometimes it's like off of the parent element,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's off the child element. It can like be all these different things.
It's never off the child element.
Okay. Made that up actually.
It's almost always your parent.
Almost.
Almost always the parent. And there's a couple exceptions to that. They're documented pretty well. You're looking at which properties inherit. That's the thing you want to look up. So, all right. Another thing I want to show you to make your stuff not look like crap. Next most common thing I see students do a lot is draw these boxes around things. Drawing a box around something in design is like explaining a joke. If you can't tell that these things go together and belong from like the other design elements, like you didn't do a good enough job. And drawing a circle around it or something doesn't make that any better. So there are some things that you can do that'll help with that though. So let's say I'm going to kill that border. I'm going to make a copy of this article. All right, so I got 2 of them now. Is anybody confused about this all kind of belonging together and this all kind of belonging together? Not really. Like, so keeping those borders around it is like not helping anything. Now, one of the things that's really popular right now. Dude, come on, man. Come on. Don't make me look dumb in front of my friends. So one of the things that's really popular right now is trying to use like virtual third dimension, make things like kind of come off the screen. So if you did anything on the web 10 years ago, you remember flat design. Flat was everything. So we use like lots of different colors and basically no gradients, no shadows, nothing like that. Everything is like very simple geometric shapes, no sense of dimension. The like current paradigm that we have to be coming out of, because like it's been a little too long, is material. So material is this idea that's sort of like it feels flat, but it has just a little bit of dimension to it. And what you're trying to do is indicate that with shadows, and things are supposed to have like motion and friction. And you're like, oh, I'm dragging this across a smooth surface or a rough surface. And so if you look at something like Google Music, I think, does it pretty well, which I haven't been able to launch it for a while. Yeah. Let's see if they've got some images of the site. Yep. Nope, just want to see the picture. But like these things are supposed to sit on top of this background, but it's a really small shadow, so they're kind of right on top of it. And everything is supposed to like sort of mirror these like physical properties of objects. So if we want to apply that to these and make it a little bit less minimalist, we could do something like box shadow. And we could say, I want this to have a shadow, and it's 3 pixels there, 0 pixels there. I want a blur radius of 5 pixels. Oh, another like easy tip for your stuff not looking bad is like use a lot less pure black. So you can soften something up like metal. All right, so now it's got these shadows on it. Doesn't look great though. What if this max width, if I applied that to the article instead? Oh, hey, now we're getting somewhere. And now, what if each of these articles pushes the next one past it a little bit? All right, cool. Now we have something that looks a little bit more material. And coincidentally, I sort of got a box for free without looking like I just drew like a 2-dimensional thing around it. You can soften that up even a little bit more. Yeah. All right. Cool. Already looking a lot less shitty. What I did, so this is the color of the box shadow. You can make it anything you want. Like, I could make it green. But if you use a really light gray instead of a black, it takes a lot of that harshness out. Because if I just do pure black, if I do pure black, that's pretty aggressive. Versus if I do like a fairly light gray, chills out a lot. You want to like hint at it. It looks like it's just barely sitting on top of the background. Double so if I take that body and give it a little bit of contrast. So instead of pure white on that, maybe this is just like a little bit off white. have to like explicitly make that white. Holy smokes, it's like it explodes off the page. And that's gonna be my last piece of advice to make your thing not look like garbage, is contrast. Contrast. So first thing that everybody reaches for when they're trying to say that this is more important than something else is size. That can be part of it, but like, see if you can do it with contrast first. The easiest way to do that is like just use grays, line it up. And the best tool for that is a thing called HSL. So if I want, let's see, what are some things I want to create a hierarchy with? So I have this, and this. And like this is bolder, this is bolder, this is bolder, and this is like emphasized. So I kind of have 3 different levels going on right now. It's not awesome. So here's a couple things I could do with contrast to really help that out. One thing I can do is lighten up this paragraph text a little bit. So in the paragraph, I'm going to say that the color should be HSL, and HSL is hue, saturation, light. If you've been using hexadecimal like this, I'm about to blow your mind with how much easier this is to work with. Hue is like what you would generally refer to as the color. It's a 360-degree wheel, 0 and 360 are red. And it goes red, green, blue. So 120 is green, 240 is blue, and it just kind of goes gradually from there. So we can say red because we're not going to keep any of the color in it. Saturation, 100% is Barney, Ronald McDonald, Play School, super saturated colors. 0 is grayscale. And then like low percentages are like pastel, high percentages are like very rich. And so we can go for 0% on that one also. And then lightness is how much white and how much black. So 100% is pure white, 0% is pure black. So let's go with just like a little bit lighter, or a little bit of a dark gray. So you can barely see it. I'm going to do these side by side so we can kind of see this in real time. I think it's interesting. So if I do that here, so if I make this pure black, looks like that. I don't know if that's coming through on the screen, but like very intense. I make that 30%, kind of chills out a little bit. Change it to 50, chills out even more. So all right, what if I did, let's see what that 30 is like. Okay, now this H3, that's feeling very aggressive. So what if I make this an H3? All right, cool. So now it's the same color as this. It's the same kind of gray. Still feels more important because it stands alone. It has more weight to it. It's a bold font, and it's a little bit bigger. I don't know if we need all of those at the same time. So what if I just make the font size the same? It still looks more important. But it's like the super centering thing. If everything's important, then nothing's important. We're just kind of chilling it out a little bit. I sort of like the article one. I want to take some weight out of the H2 though. So I can also, I can say the font weight on this should be 400. Oops, sorry, I want that be H2. Okay, and then I want to have a little bit darker than that.
What's font weight?
Font weight is how thick are the characters. So like this H1 here, how big it is like how tall it is, how thick those lines are its weight. So if I darken that a little bit more, cool. And then one last one, I do the H1. One of my favorite tricks to do with an H1 is go with a really, really light weight, like 300, and then lighten it up a little bit, and then make it, that's too much, and then make it bigger. Font size, 32 pixels. That's what it is right now. 42. Cool. All right. Look how much dimension we have on this. Like, lots of hierarchy there now. We didn't have to add colors. We didn't have to center shit. Didn't have to draw boxes around stuff. Play with the colors and the sizes and the weights. And don't reach for the size first. Let's see if anybody else does this too. Weird. Look at those really light grays and those kind of medium grays, and like this is a little bit lighter than that. And we have these different kinds of weights here. We have that's heavier weight, that's a lighter, or sorry, that's a little bit of weight and a lot darker black. This is kind of a gray. If you start looking for that, you'll see it everywhere. You go to Gmail, YouTube, any of these things. You'll see something like 9, 10, 20 different levels of gray being used. That's your like go-to tool for establishing hierarchy. Cool. Yeah.
So you said this kind of styling is, or at least the box part with like, we're reaching the tail end of that styling.
Oh, material. So
No.
nobody can tell. So it's kind of the thing about hip things is like the hipsters pick that, and I don't know that they've picked yet. But on some podcast that I used to host, we tried to answer this very question a couple months ago, and I don't think any of us really found something that was like, oh, for sure, that's like coming up.
Well, okay. And it's partially because like technology has been relatively static. So screens are
Yeah.
just flat screens. And
Right.
therefore-
There's some of that, but this is like fashion. In the same way, like going back to typefaces like looking dumb or something. Well, now everybody does material, so it's not special to do material. You don't look like a great designer if you're doing that. And so, since that's what everybody is doing, the way you set yourself apart is by intelligently not doing that. And then everybody copies you, and now you need, like, that's how fashion works, how everything. That's why it keeps moving. That's why we haven't solved design. You're trying to stand out from people. Yeah.
What if your background image is dynamic and your text is blending in partially through the picture? Is there a way to
Don't do that. So like, there's actually a lot of tricks for that. The best way to do it, let's see if we can find.
Something like that, if you just wanted to write text on that picture right there.
So like, you can't. Like if you're trying to write text on top of this, the way that it is right now, not going to work. There's two tricks that will, if you need to do that. The first is to lighten this up a lot. And so it's like completely washed out. Then you probably have enough contrast. Or you go the exact opposite way. Super dark, where you're just seeing faint outlines of it, and then do light text on top of it. That's not as accessible, but kind of works. A way, artier way to do it that tends to work pretty good is to desaturate it. So if you lower the saturation on the image, there's just less difference between any of the colors, so that helps. The most common one I see though is to add a color wash to it. And you can do that with pure CSS, which is kind of nice. if you put a div over this that just has a static color and you make it with an opacity, then you've washed out like all of this in a blue or something, so you can still sort of make it out. But you've created a fairly like neutral field that you can put text on top of. Those are some tricks. Yeah, another thing that I don't see as much, but yeah, also don't do this. How many of these sites that we've been to have image backgrounds? Not that many. No image background. No image background. No image background. Even things like this is a good example of it. It's got some interest in here. It's got motion. It's got these cool geometric shapes to it, but they're super dark, which is why you can read this text on top of it.
So no MySpace websites?
No.
Well, like, isn't part of the reason why we haven't seen any image backgrounds because specifically the sites we've been looking at are portals to buy things, or whereas for
Sure.
instance like a marketing agency, I've seen like
Awesome.
those kind of websites do use a lot of backgrounds.
You have like, yeah, what with you on it, background.
Yeah, your website, Kyle, perfectly has like a video.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
So-
the site is personalized, right?
Is this really a background though? Like it kind of is. This is it's a background video. This is the content also though. I'm doing very little on top of it, and also I edited the video so there's never anything over here.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like your actual background is the lines.
Yeah.
And
It
then you're
basically
just
is.
playing behind that.
See that?
Fun thing about the lines too, like yeah, it kind of looks like scan lines and some other things. It's because to get this to load so quickly with a fucking video, I need to super lower the resolution. It looks like garbage if you just look at the actual thing. There's artifacts everywhere, but I put a color wash on it so that the text pops out. And these lines end up masking a lot of those artifacts.
That's funny.
But yeah, the actual like content of the site, it's the inverse of that. But there you go. So let's look at a marketing agency, the one that I use, WonderWorks. So they have that. And these are kind of neat because you can move their projects around. Ass. But yeah, still not really an image background, other than that splash. Got that. Oh, it's a different one every time. Yeah.
That just, so good to hear, I think it's keep your audience for your set in mind. And that will take a lot of your stuff.
Oh yeah, 100%. Cool. So before we break, our objective here was to recall at least 3 different ways to keep your app from looking like garbage. So let's review. What are the ones that we talked about? Fonts. Don't use the default font. What else? Padding. Use more of it than you think. Start with too much. Take it out. What else? Left align. Unless you got a good reason not to, how about just stick with that? What else? Contrast. Use contrast to establish hierarchy before you just reach for size. What else? Taking away your browser defaults. What else?
Play with grays before other.
Yeah, that's contrast.
Oh, right.
Cool. What else? Was that? Box shadow. Stop drawing squares around things. If you do want to do something like that, reach for box shadow instead. Also, cool box shadow trick. So these are like these really light grays. Depending on the site. So if we HSL that, let's say the theme of the site had kind of like a blue tint to it. Red, green, blue, so 240. And if I do like pretty desaturated on that and kind of light. That's what I mean by like you can do head math with colors. And then you go, that's a little too saturated. Then you just knock that down. I have no idea how to think in hex. Like, who does? Okay, it's still a shadow, but they got a little bit of blue on it now. And if I make that way bigger, that might pop out a little more. See how there's like a slight blue tint to it? So you can do that to tie that into like a branding theme or something like that. It's a little bit more interesting than pure gray. But yeah, box shadow works a lot better than a square. Yeah.
So you can use like that HSL function anytime you would use a normal color?
Any color.
That's cool.
Any color can be a keyword, a hex, HSL, RGB, or HSLA, which is partially transparent, or RGBA, which is partially transparent.
I was gonna say for the list of stuff like use Serif Fonts for long form readability, and if you need help finding one, go on Google and filter by serifs that have a lot of fucking themes or whatever. Sucks.
Yes, but on the web, be careful with like all of your long form stuff with serifs. They also feel formal. They have a different vibe to them.
Okay.
And like, I don't know, you have to, it's a hard one.
Okay.
If you don't know, like Montserrat and Roboto, both of which are sans serif fonts, are totally fine. And also, design is an art. It's not about being like super clever about shit. Like,
I would say it's
so like medium looks really good. If we go over here. Okay, so this is a serif font. I like that font. All right, Element inspect it and steal that shit. That's all you got to do. And like just in general, you go, all right, well, this is a banned website. Are banned websites in this genre? How many of them are doing that? This is like the research part of it. Do I want to stand out from them, or do I want to like blend in with them? Am I meeting expectations, changing expectations? So on the web, your use of serifs or not is like probably more heavily influenced. Cool. Anything else? That we could, Parker, you had something.
Yeah, I was just wondering about pop shadow or what the
Sure. It's offset from the top, offset from the left, and the third one is how. So those are pure. If I take off that that third thing, then and make it that instead, they're solid colors. If I want them to have that fuzzy thing, that's what the third one is how much of it should be fuzzy. Cool. Yeah.
I would also say that, like you said, kind of feelings that are evoked by fonts.
Mhm.
Obviously, they say colors, like use the original 16-bit colors and something like from 1990.
Oh, yeah.
Or whatever, or you know, kind of like
Totally.
similar to, like feelings to colors too.
Yes. So, do you want to do that? Do you want it to feel like 16-bitty kind of thing? Well, then cool. Limit yourself to those colors. The way you make something sound like chiptunes in video games and shit is, all right, well, the NES had a sine wave or a square wave generator, 2 square wave generators, and a sawtooth wave generator. Cool. You should probably use those 3 oscillators, and like right off the bat, it's going to sound a little bit like an NES. And it also has a noise generator. So yeah, you can call inspiration from things like that. What else? Yeah.
There's also a tool that designers use
Mm-hmm.
called Zeppelin. That means they're going to give you the whole CSS thing. So maybe we're lucky.
Maybe. Although every single one of those tools, Zeppelin included, the things that it outputs are just garbage. Every time I see somebody go like, programmers are getting replaced, man. There's a tool that writes the code for you. I've been hearing that shit since like Dreamweaver in like 1998. It's like, on your last legs now, web developer. We can do it ourselves. Like, I keep thinking that. So, and every one of those like design tools has something like that, and the current one is like, oh, Figma or one of those tools like exports React components. Like, not really. Not so much that you wouldn't need a developer to work on it, and your developer is going to look at it and go, what is this shit? All right. They probably spend more time fixing it than they do doing it from scratch. So maybe someday, but if you do get a Zeppelin or Figma or a sketch file or something like that, what's neat about them is it helps you figure out how things should change at different sizes, which like a static mockup doesn't. And those changes, when something snaps, what it should do in between different things, that's kind of the hard thing in implementing a design. And those tools are really good for that. Anything else? Takeaways, questions? Mm-hmm. So you got to be careful. Random shit you find on Google, you probably don't have rights for. But you can use something like Unsplash, which is free. That's the whole point of it. And a lot of them are big too. It's hard to find, even just on Google Images, awesome high-res large images, especially if you want to do a big hero or something like that. You generally have to attribute whatever image you're using. But, I mean, there's thousands of these. I'm making a recipe site. All right, well, there you go. And then if these aren't enough for you, like blogs and stuff, we'll use paid services that have usually more high quality things. And, oh, you like this one? Well, here's 50 more from that same session that all kind of go together. So that's one consideration with that. The other is all those Google fonts are like open use, but like Helvetica isn't on here, like a couple really good fonts. And so those you usually have to pay for a license for, and 99% of those are owned by Adobe. And so you use Adobe Typekit. It's like a script tag that you install, and they monitor usage of it, and they charge you for it and that kind of shit. Yeah. Yep, that's common.
Cool. Yeah. If it's helpful, I used to have to look up that kind of stuff. Google, you can image search and you specify which kind of license.
Yep.
And then resolution.
Yep. Yeah.
But you get a lot of shit results of Unsplash and things do that.
Yeah, Unsplash is like, that's everybody's go-to for just random shit. If you've ever written an article in Medium and like there's that cool image search thing there, it's just Unsplash. Yeah, they do. Cool. Anything else? All right. Hopefully you can recall at least 3 different ways from keeping your app from looking like garbage. Let's go feel some stuff. First, let's go tidy up in there. Thank you.